My manager forged a federal document to fire me and replace me with his unqualified friend, thinking I was just expensive overhead. He didn't realize my clearance wasn't just paper, it was the digital key to the entire national defense grid, and he had just thrown it away. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was fighting a migraine that felt less like a headache and more like a localized lightning storm behind my left eye. It was the kind of throbbing, blinding pain that usually signaled I had been staring at a terminal for 48 hours straight, which, incidentally, I had. The war room, my windowless, climate-controlled sanctuary deep within the bowels of the facility, was humming with the sound of cooling fans and the rhythmic click of my mechanical keyboard. I was the lead cryptographer, a title that sounded fancy on LinkedIn, but in practice meant I was the janitor for the nation's digital secrets. I cleaned up the messes, reinforced the walls, and made sure that when the government sent a packet of data from point A to point B, it didn't end up on a hacker forum in between. I pressed enter on the final line of code. The compiler bar in the center of my screen filled up, turning a soothing, vibrant green. Deployment successful, I whispered to the empty room, my voice raspy from disuse. I had just patched a 0-day vulnerability in the cross-federal communication pipeline. It was a masterpiece of mathematical weaving, a digital Kevlar vest I had stitched together while the rest of the eastern seaboard was sleeping. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, closing my burning eyes for just a second, waiting for the endorphin rush of a job well done. It didn't come. Instead, my Outlook notification chime pinged, a sharp, discordant sound that pierced right through the migraine haze. I cracked one eye open, a calendar invite. Subject, status update priority, hi host, Derek Vance attendees, Elena R., Janice M., HR, time now. My stomach did a slow, heavy roll. Status update, meetings with no agenda attached were never good news, and inviting Janice from HR, that was the corporate equivalent of a loaded gun on the table. I grabbed my water bottle, my hand trembling slightly from a mix of caffeine withdrawal and exhaustion, and stood up. The room spun. I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. I was in no condition for a battle of wits with Derek, a man who thought synergy was a personality trait. I was physically depleted, emotionally raw from stress, and running on fumes. I smoothed my blazer, trying to look like the high-level architect I was rather than the exhausted coder I felt like, and walked out of the secure zone. The walk to the administrative wing felt like a march to the gallows. The fluorescent lights in the hallway were too bright, buzzing with an electric frequency that grated against my nerves. When I entered the HR conference room, a glass-walled fishbowl designed to make everyone inside feel exposed, Derek was already sitting at the head of the fake mahogany table. He wasn't wearing a tie. He was wearing one of those quarter-zip fleeces that tech bros wear when they want to look agile. He was tapping a manicured finger on a closed manila folder. Janice, the HR director, sat next to him, refusing to meet my eyes. She smelled like lavender and panic. Elena, Derek said. He didn't smile. He had practiced this face. It was his grave leadership mask. Have a seat. I sat, keeping my spine rigid despite the pounding in my head. I just finished the patch, Derek. The vulnerability is closed. If this is about the overtime logs, I can explain. This isn't about the code, Elena, Derek interrupted, his voice smooth, oily. He slid the folder toward me. We received a flag during the quarterly security audit this morning. I looked at the folder, then at him. A flag. Open it. I flipped the cover. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It looked official at a glance, standard font, serious header. But as my eyes scanned the text, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Subject, clearance revocation target, Elena Rasova reason, administrative lapse, failure to adjudication standards. Status, terminated effective immediately. I read it twice. My brain, usually capable of processing complex algorithms in nanoseconds, stuttered. I looked up, my brow furrowing. Derek, this says my top secret SCI clearance is revoked. It does, Derek said, leaning back, a hint of satisfaction curling the corner of his lip. Effective immediately. And as you know, Elena, employment at this firm is contingent on maintaining active clearance status. You can't be in the building. You can't touch the terminals. You are, effectively, a civilian. This is impossible, I sigh. My voice dangerously quiet. My reinvestigation date isn't until 2027. I haven't traveled abroad. I have no debt. I have no foreign contacts. Clearances don't just lapse administratively. If there was an issue, the adjudication facility would have contacted me directly. I would be in a room with the FBI right now, not you. The bureaucracy is messy. Derek waved a hand dismissively, as if discussing a late pizza delivery rather than my career. The point is, the paperwork is here. Your access is gone. We have to let you go, Elena. Janice finally spoke, pushing a stack of papers toward me with a shaking hand. We have prepared a severance package, 2 weeks' pay. If you sign the NDA regarding your departure today, we can expedite the check. I looked at the letter again. I looked at the font, Arial, not the standard Times New Roman used in official duty correspondence. I looked at the spacing. I looked at the lack of a digital watermark. It was a forgery, a sloppy, arrogant forgery. I looked at Derek. He was watching me with the eyes of a predator who thought he had trapped a wounded animal. He knew I was sick. He knew I was tired. He thought I would just fold. You're firing me, I stated, the realization settling in my chest like a cold stone. We're processing a mandatory termination based on compliance failure, Derek corrected, using buzzwords to sanitize the knife he was twisting in my back. We need fresh eyes in the department anyway. Someone more, adaptable to the modern workflow. I felt a wave of nausea, but it wasn't from the migraine anymore. It was from the sheer toxicity radiating from him. I had built this department. I had sacrificed my marriage, my health, and my sanity to build the digital vaults that kept this country safe. And here was a man who couldn't code, hello world in Python, using a fake piece of paper to destroy me because I refused to be his yes man. I pushed the severance papers back across the table. I'm not signing that, I said. It's standard procedure, Janice squeaked. The betrayal isn't the firing, Janice, I said, locking eyes with Derek. It's the lie. And in my line of work, a lie is a vulnerability, and vulnerabilities always get exploited. I stood up. The pain in my head was still there, but it was being eclipsed by a cold, hard rage. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. Have it your way, Derek sneered, his mask of professional concern slipping to reveal the petty tyrant underneath. If you want to leave empty-handed, that's your choice. Hand over your badge and your RSA token. I reached into my bag, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of my laptop, company property, now forbidden fruit. I bypassed it and grabbed my lanyard. The hard plastic rectangle had been my identity for 12 years. It was more than a key. It was proof of my existence in the shadow world of national defense. I placed it on the table with a soft clack. Next, I fished out the RSA token, the small, pill-shaped fob with the LCD screen displaying a constantly changing 6-digit number. And the keys, Derek said, extending his hand. I paused, my hand hovering over the table. What keys? The encryption keys, he demanded, snapping his fingers impatiently. The master passcodes for the vault. I need to hand them off to the transition team. I stared at him, genuinely stunned by the depth of his ignorance. It was like a pilot asking a bird to hand over its ability to fly. Derek, I said slowly, keeping my voice flat to mask the tremor of rage. The keys aren't physical. They aren't a password written on a sticky note. They are algorithmic seeds. They rotate every 6 hours. Well, write them down, he barked. I can't. The system generates them based on my biometric profile, I explained, though I knew I was wasting my breath. The root architecture is tied to my retina scan and my keystroke dynamics. It's a biometric handshake. If I'm not the one at the console, the keys don't exist. We'll figure it out, he scoffed, snatching the RSA token from the table. You engineers always make things sound more complicated than they are to secure your job security. Just go. Security will escort you out. You really have no idea what you're doing, do you? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. You think this is just IT support. You think you can just swap out parts like a broken printer. I think your time has passed, Elena. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper intended only for me. We need fresh blood, loyal blood, not someone who questions every order I give. Loyal, that was the key word. He didn't want competence, he wanted a lapdog. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back at Janice, who was aggressively organizing her papers to avoid witnessing the execution. I walked past the security desk in the lobby. Old man Miller was there, staring at a monitor. He looked up, confused, as I breezed past the turnstile's W. Without swiping out, because I no longer had a badge to swipe. Leaving early, Elena? He called out, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. Everything okay? I paused at the glass doors. The Maryland humidity was pressing against the glass, waiting to suffocate me. Something like that, Miller, I said, forcing a tight smile. Take care of yourself. I walked out into the blinding sun. My car, a sensible sedan that I practically lived in, was baking on the asphalt. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there. The silence in the car was heavy. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. He had lied about a federal clearance. That wasn't just a firing offense, that was a felony. That was go to federal prison and make license plates territory if the wrong people found out. And I was going to make sure the very wrong people found out. But first, I needed to secure my insurance. I reached into my blazer pocket, bypassing the pack of gum and my car keys, and pulled out a small, unassuming tube of lip balm. It looked exactly like a generic stick of cherry chapstick. I popped the cap off. It wasn't wax inside. It was a USB-C connector. I held it up to the sunlight. Derek thought he had stripped me of everything. He thought that by taking my badge and my token, he had locked me out. He thought he was the king of the castle because he held the physical keys. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He had forgotten that I didn't just operate the system, I built it. And when you build a house designed to keep everyone out, you always leave a window unlocked for yourself, just in case you get locked out in the cold. I had plugged this drive into the maintenance port minutes before the meeting, initiating a silent mirror of the server logs. I had a copy of everything. Every email, every access log, and most importantly, the digital footprint of the system functioning perfectly before his interference. You want to play games, Derek? I whispered to the empty car. Let's play. I didn't drive home immediately. Home was empty. My husband had left 3 years ago, citing that he felt like he was married to a ghost. He wasn't wrong. You don't build grade A defense architecture by working 9 to 5. You do it by missing anniversaries, by canceling vacations at the last minute because a server in Virginia hiccuped, by spending your Christmas Eve debugging a firewall instead of wrapping presents. I had given this company, and by extension, this country, the best years of my life. I had missed my niece's first steps. I had missed my father's retirement party. I had traded my personal life for the cold comfort of knowing that the data was safe. And for what? To be discarded by a man whose biggest professional achievement was organizing the Office Fantasy Football League. I pulled into a nondescript coffee shop parking lot, one far enough away from the office that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I needed to think. I needed to process the enemy I was facing. Derek Vance. He had transferred to our division 6 months ago from logistics. He was the kind of manager who used words like streamline, right size, and paradigm shift without knowing what they meant. From day one, he had viewed my department, cryptography, and data assurance as a black hole for the budget. "Why do we need triple redundancy on the encryption?" he had asked in our first meeting. "Can't we just use the cloud? It's cheaper." I had spent an hour explaining that the cloud was just someone else's computer, and when you're storing the flight paths of nuclear submarines, you don't put them on a server shared with a teenage influencer's TikTok drafts. He had nodded, that glazed-over look in his eyes, and I knew then that he didn't care about security. He cared about the bottom line. He wanted to cut costs, show the board a surplus, and get his bonus. And I, with my expensive hardware requests and my refusal to outsource coding to low-bid contractors, was the biggest obstacle to that bonus. But today he had escalated from incompetent to malicious. I pulled out my phone. I had removed the company's SIM card immediately after leaving the building, swapping it for a burner I kept for emergencies. I pulled up the external monitoring app. Technically, accessing this was a gray area. Morally, it was necessary. I saw the login attempts starting already. User, admin override status, failed, biometric mismatch. User, root access status, failed, token invalid. He was trying to get in, and he wasn't alone. I saw a new device pinging the network, a laptop, MacBook Pro unrecognized MAC address. "Who are you?" I murmured, zooming in on the log details. Then I remembered the whispers I'd heard a week ago. Derek bragging in the break room about a whiz kid he knew from his old fraternity days. Someone who was a coding wizard. Someone who could modernize our dinosaur system. Ethan, that was the nom. Hey. I pictured him immediately. Probably mid-20s. Probably self-taught on YouTube. Probably thought that because he could write a script to scrape Twitter data, he could handle military-grade encryption. The logs showed the new user trying to execute a command. Command, sudo apt-get update error, repository not found, firewall blocking external connection. I let out a short, bitter laugh. He was trying to update the system using public internet repositories. He was trying to pull code from the open web into a sensitive compartmented information facility, SCIF. It was like trying to fill a submarine with screen doors. Derek hadn't just fired me. He had replaced me with a child playing with a loaded gun. The phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from the system's core kernel, a heartbeat alert that only I received. Warning, biometric administrator absent. Dead man switch timer initiated. Time to lockdown, 24:00:00. My heart hammered against my ribs. The dead man's switch. I had programmed it years ago as a failsafe against a hostile takeover. The logic was simple. If the prime admin, me, didn't authenticate via biometric handshake within 24 hours of a system modification, the vault assumed the facility had been overrun. It would initiate a total lockdown, encrypting the data into a block of noise so dense that the heat death of the universe would arrive before a supercomputer could crack it. Derek didn't know about the switch. Ethan definitely didn't know about the switch. They had 24 hours to figure out that they were standing on a trapdoor, and I was the only one holding the rope. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going to intervene. Not yet. I was going to let them twist in the wind. I was going to let Derek Vance find out exactly what happens when you fire the person who knows how the engine works and replace them with a yes man who thinks Python is just a snake. I drove to my war room away from the war room, my house. It was a modest place, bought mostly because it was close to the office, but the basement was my fortress. I had a setup down there that rivaled some small startups: 3 monitors, a dedicated server rack for my personal projects, and an internet connection that was shielded behind 7 layers of VPNs. I sat down, tossed the chapstick drive onto the desk, and cracked my knuckles. The migraine was gone, replaced by the cold, crystalline focus of the hunt. The first step was investigation. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I knew Derek was a climber, a corporate parasite, but I needed leverage. I needed to know why he was so desperate to cut costs that he'd risk federal prison. I started with public records, Derek Vance. It didn't take long. A few queries into the county clerk's database revealed the cracks in his facade. A second mortgage taken out 3 months ago. A lien on a boat he constantly bragged about but apparently couldn't afford. And then, the kicker, a lawsuit filed by a previous employer for breach of fiduciary duty, settled out of court. He was drowning in debt. The streamlining bonus wasn't just for a new car, he needed it to stay afloat. Then I turned my attention to Ethan. I used the MAC address from the unauthorized laptop to cross-reference known device registries. It was a long shot, but kids like Ethan usually registered their devices on every public network available. Bingo, Ethan G. I found his GitHub profile. It was underwhelming. A few forks of popular repositories, a half-finished app for tracking craft beer ratings, and a bio that read, Disruptor, Full-Stack Ninja. Python is life. I scrolled through his public code commits. Sloppy syntax, hard-coded passwords, no comments explaining his logic. This is who you replaced me with, Derek, I muttered, shaking my head. A craft beer app developer. I turned my attention back to the live feed of the office logs. The Chapstick drive had installed a passive listener on the network before I left. It wasn't stealing data, that would be illegal, but it was listening to the system's internal monologue. And the system was screaming. 1400 HOURS. User, ETHAN admin command, force mount dev /SDA 1 error, volume is encrypted. Key required. 1405 HOURS. User, ETHAN admin command, rmrf var/log/checksums, attempted system, action blocked, critical file. My breath caught in my throat. He was trying to delete the checksums. The checksums are the DNA of the data. They verify that the files haven't been tampered with. If you delete them without the proper rehashing sequence, the system assumes the data is corrupted. Don't do it, you idiot, I hissed at the screen. If he forced that deletion, he wouldn't just be locked out. He would trigger the integrity collapse. I grabbed my burner phone. I had a contact, a lawyer named Sarah who specialized in whistleblower cases. I had hoped never to need her, but I kept her card in my wallet next to my emergency cash. Sarah, I said when she picked up, this is Elena Rasova. We met at the privacy conference last year. Elena, the crypto genius, her voice was sharp, alert. Everything okay? No, I need you to prepare a package. I'm about to become a whistleblower on a federal contractor. And I need you to find a contact at the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. DCSA, that's heavy, Elena. What are we talking about? I'm talking about a forged clearance revocation and an active, unauthorized attempt to breach a top-secret vault by an unvetted civilian. There was a silence on the line. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back. I'm opening a file now, Sarah said, her voice dropping into professional gear. Document everything. Don't touch the system yourself. Let them dig the hole. Oh, they're digging, I said, watching a new error message pop up on my screen. They're bringing in an excavator. The next morning, the summons came. Not via email, but a text to my personal cell, the one they theoretically shouldn't have been using for official business anymore. Derek, we need to talk. There's a glitch in the transition. Come in for a consult. Standard hourly rate. I stared at the screen. A glitch? He still thought it was a bug. He didn't realize the building was burning down around him. I didn't reply. An hour later, another text. Derek, Elena, this is serious. The system is lagging. We can't access the client files. If you don't help, it's on you. I laughed out loud. The audacity. He fires me, claims my clearance is void, and then tries to guilt-trip me into fixing his mess. I decided it was time to poke the bear. I replied, my clearance is revoked, Derek, remember. I can't touch the system. It would be a crime. 3 dots appeared instantly. He was typing, then stopped. then typing again. Derek, we can work something out. Temporary authorization, just come in. I waited until 2:00 p.m. The 24-hour timer on the dead man's switch was ticking down. They had less than 4 hours before the system locked down permanently. I drove to the office, not to go in but to watch. I parked across the street in a strip mall lot that offered a clear view of the front entrance. I had my laptop open on the passenger seat, tethered to my phone. At 2:30 p.m., I saw Ethan come out. He looked haggard. He was pacing in front of the building, smoking a vape pen like it was his oxygen supply. He was on the phone, waving his arms. I tuned my software to pick up the local Wi-Fi traffic, the guest network that bled out into the parking lot. I couldn't hear his call, but I could see his network activity on his phone. He was searching Stack Overflow. Search query, Linux server says integrity collapse impending, what do search query? How to bypass biometric lock layman terms, search query. Prison time for accidental data loss government. Getting warm, Ethan, I whispered. Then I saw Derek march out. He grabbed Ethan by the shoulder, nearly spinning him around. They were arguing. Derek pointed at the building, then at his watch. Ethan threw his hands up in a gesture of helplessness. I decided to make my presence known. I sent a command to the chapstick drive. It wasn't a hack. It was a scheduled task I had set up ages ago for system health checks, which could be triggered remotely if you had the right key. I triggered a system announce. Inside the war room, a robotic voice, one I had programmed to sound like a calm, stern librarian, would be speaking over the PA system right now. Alert, biometric integrity check failed. Administrator absence confirmed. Countdown to secure purge, 3 hours. I saw Ethan freeze. He dropped his vape. He looked at Derek. Derek looked at the building, his face draining of color even from this distance. They ran back inside. My phone buzzed, Derek again. Derek, Aline, pick up, now. I let it ring. Derek, I'll give you whatever you want. Double your salary, a bonus, just stop it. It says it's going to purge. I typed back, I can't stop it, Derek. I'm a civilian. I don't have the keys. You took them. Derek, tell me the code. Me, there is no code. It's me. It's my eyes. It's my hands. And since I'm not an employee, I can't enter the facility. Derek, I'll hire you back, right now. Me, with what clearance? You said it was revoked. He didn't reply to that. He knew that I knew. The trap had snapped shut, and he was staring at his own leg in the jaws. The final hours were a masterclass in panic. Through my backdoor access, I watched the logs spiral into chaos. Ethan was trying everything now. He was throwing random scripts at the firewall, trying to brute force the admin password, even trying to physically unmount the drives. 16:45 hours. System alert. Physical tamper detected on drive array 4. Security protocols escalated to level 5. Level 5 meant the system locked the doors. Literally, the magnetic locks on the server room would engage, sealing the hard. We're inside to prevent theft or physical destruction. I saw the camera feed in the hallway. Derek was banging on the glass door of the war room. Ethan was trapped inside, looking like a rat in a cage, shouting something that the audio pickup couldn't catch, but his terrified expression said it all. Meanwhile, Sarah had come through. I have a contact, she texted me. Agent Miller, DCSA, she's interested. She's very interested. She says if the revocation letter is fake, it's fraud against the duty. If the system purges, it's destruction of federal property. They're mobilizing. ETA, I asked. Tomorrow morning, 800. They want to catch them in the act of the cover-up. The system purges at 1800 today, I replied. If they wait until morning, the data is gone. Can you stop it? I can, I typed, but I need to be in the room. Then you wait, Sarah advised. Let it purge. We have your backups. The destruction of the primary data is the proof of their incompetence. If you fix it now, they can claim it was just a glitch. I hesitated. Let it burn. It went against every instinct I had as an architect. That code was my life's work. But she was right. If I saved them now, Derek would spin it. He would say he called me in for support, that it was a minor issue. He would survive. I had to let it go to the brink. 1750 HORS, 10 minutes to purge. My phone rang. It wasn't Derek. It was a Washington, D.C. area code. "This is Elena," I answered. "Ms. Rasova, this is Director Hastings, NSA." I sat up straighter in my car seat. "Director, we are monitoring a critical integrity failure at Node 4. We show you as the prime admin, but your status is listed as terminated." "That's correct, sir. My manager informed me yesterday that my clearance was revoked." "We have no record of a revocation, Ms. Rasova. Your clearance is active and exemplary." "I have the letter he gave me, sir. It's a forgery." There was a pause on the line, a cold, dangerous silence. "I see," Hastings said. His voice was like grinding stones. "Ms. Rasova, can you override the purge from your location?" "No, sir. It requires a physical biometric handshake. I need to be at the terminal." "We have a team en route, but they won't make it in 10 minutes. If that data is lost, it compromises active operations." "I have a backup," I said. "Secure, offline, mirrored yesterday before I was escorted out." "You do?" "I always have a contingency, Director." "Good, hold on to it. Do not, I repeat, do not give it to anyone from your former company. We are seizing the node. Let the purge happen. We need the logs to show the destruction caused by unauthorized access." "Understood." 17:59 hours. I watched the countdown on my laptop screen. 00:00:58. Inside the war room, Ethan was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. Derek was slumped against the wall in the hallway, staring at his phone. 00:00:10:00:00:05. 00:00:00. System purge initiated. On my screen, the logs turned a violent red. Deleting root, deleting home, overwriting sectors with random noise pattern. It was done. The vault was empty. The lights in the server room would be flashing red now. The fans would be spinning down. Derek Vance had just successfully streamlined the department into oblivion. I closed my laptop. I felt a strange sense of peace. The trap had worked. The evidence was irrefutable. Now came the cleanup. I started the engine and drove home to get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a very busy day. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the office building, turning it into a glittering monument to corporate ambition. To the average commuter driving past, it was just another Tuesday. But inside the black Chevrolet Suburban parked in the Visitor of the Month spot, the atmosphere was heavy with the promise of retribution. I wasn't driving my sensible sedan today. I was sitting in the back seat of a government vehicle, flanked by Special Agent Miller and a man who introduced himself simply as Asset Recovery Specialist, which I assumed was polite speak for the muscle. "We have boots on the ground inside," Agent Miller said, tapping an earpiece. "Site security has been neutralized. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, arrived 10 minutes ago. He's currently screaming at your former manager in the lobby." I smoothed the fabric of my navy blazer. I had dressed for a funeral, Derek S. "Is the perimeter secure?" "Tight as a drum. No one leaves with so much as a USB stick until we say so. You ready to go in, Ms. Rasova?" "I've been ready since he asked for my badge," I said. The door opened. I stepped out onto the asphalt. The humidity was already rising, but I felt cold, sharp, and focused. We walked toward the main entrance. I didn't rush. I let the heels of my shoes click a steady, ominous rhythm against the pavement. When the automatic doors slid open, the sound of chaos hit us instantly. The lobby, usually a hushed cat. Hedral of Commerce was a disaster zone. Employees were huddled in clusters, whispering. Old Man Miller, no relation to the agent, was standing behind his security desk, looking terrified as he clutched his clipboard. And in the center of the room, near the turnstiles, was the main event. Mr. Henderson, the CEO who usually only descended from his penthouse office for quarterly bonus speeches, was purple in the face. He was waving a tablet at Derek. "What do you mean, gone?" Henderson roared. "The client is the Department of Defense, Derek. You don't tell them the data is gone, you tell them it's buffering." Derek looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His fleece was wrinkled, his hair gel had failed him, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a drain pipe. "It's a glitch, sir," Derek stammered, his hands shaking. "The transition caused a temporary cache error. Ethan is working on it, we just need time." "Ethan," Henderson spat the name. "The kid in the hoodie who asked me if the server room had a vape detector. That's your solution." "He's a disruptor," Derek pleaded. "He's agile." "He's a liability." I stepped through the turnstiles. The asset recovery specialist simply flashed a badge at Old Man Miller, who nodded frantically and buzzed us through. "Good morning," I said, my voice cutting through the shouting like a razor blade. The silence that followed was absolute. Derek spun around. His eyes bulged when he saw me, and then they went wide with terror when he saw the people standing behind me. "Elena," he breathed, a mix of relief and panic. "Oh, thank God, you're here." He turned to Henderson, forcing a desperate, manic smile. "See, I told you, I called her in. She's here to consult. It's all under control." He started walking toward me, arms open as if to welcome an old friend. "Elena, great to see you. We have a little hiccup with the node. If you could just hop on a terminal and—" Agent Miller stepped in front of me. She didn't shove him. She just occupied the space with such authority that Derek bounced off her aura. "Step back, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dry as dust. "Who are you?" Derek demanded, trying to summon some shred of his managerial bravado. "This is a private company. You can't just barge in here." "I am Special Agent Miller, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency," she said, holding up her credentials. "And this is no longer a private company. As of 600 hours, this facility is a crime scene." "Crime scene?" Henderson squeaked. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Now, hold on, we are a compliant partner. If there's been a data breach—" "There has been a destruction of federal assets," Miller corrected. "Triggered by unauthorized access attempts overseen by your Director of Operations." Derek pointed a shaking finger at me. "She did it. She's the admin. She set a trap." "I set a lock, Derek," I said, stepping around Miller to face him. "A lock that only opens for the rightful keyholder. You tried to pick it with a crowbar." "You abandoned your post," Derek yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. "You were terminated, you walked out." "I was terminated," I agreed, raising my voice so the huddled employees could hear. "Based on a document you provided. A document stating my federal clearance had been revoked." I reached into my bag and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper he had slid across the table 2 days ago. I handed it to Agent Miller. "Exhibit A," I said. Miller took it. She scanned it, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, are you aware that this document is a forgery? Ms. Risova's clearance is active and in good standing. This letter mimics a duty directive but cites non-existent statutes. Forging federal security documents is a felony carrying a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years. Henderson stared at the paper. He looked at Derek. The realization hit him like a freight train. You forged it," Henderson whispered. "You told me the agency flagged her. You told me we had to fire her." "It was a strategy," Derek shrieked, his voice cracking. "She was too expensive. She was legacy overhead. Ethan said he could do the job for half the salary. I was trying to save the budget." "You risked a $1 billion defense contract to save $40,000 a year." Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. "It would have worked if she hadn't rigged the system." Derek spat, glaring at me with pure venom. "She sabotaged it. She's the villain here. Arrest her." The system behaved exactly as designed, I said calmly. It detected an intruder. It detected the absence of the prime administrator, and it initiated a defensive purge to prevent the theft of classified intelligence. I didn't sabotage it, Derek. I built it to be smarter than you. The data is gone, Derek sneered. A last-ditch attempt to drag me down W. You let it burn, so you're just as incompetent as I am. We're both useless now. I smiled. It was the smile of a chess player who had seen checkmate 10 moves ago. Agent Miller, I said, would you like me to restore the node? Miller nodded, please. I walked toward the war room. The crowd parted for me. I felt like Moses if Moses wore a blazer and carried a tube of lip balm. I entered the room. It was hot, smelling of ozone and Ethan's nervous sweat. The server rack was silent, the lights blinking a slow, ominous red. I sat in my chair. It felt right. I pulled the chapstick, dry from my pocket. What is that? Henderson asked, hovering in the doorway. This, I said, plugging it into the maintenance port, is what you pay me for. I typed in the command. Mount drive, security key backup auth user, architect restore FROM mirror, date yesterday. The screen flickered. The red text stopped scrolling. A progress bar appeared. Restoring integrity, 10%, 30%. The fans on the server rack whirred to life. The lights flickered from red to amber, and then, with a satisfying ping, to solid green. System restored, I announced, spinning the chair around. Zero data loss, the vault is secure. The silence in the lobby was broken only by the hum of the servers. Derek stared at the green lights. He looked small, he looked defeated, he looked finished. You had it, he whispered. You had it the whole time. I never leave the house without a backup, Derek, I said. Rule number 1 of cryptography. Assume the enemy is already inside. The fallout was swift and absolute. Agent Miller motioned to the asset recovery specialist. They didn't do it dramatically. They just walked up to Derek and firmly took him by the arms. Derek Vance, Miller said, reciting the words that every corrupt manager nightmares about. You are being detained for questioning regarding fraud, mishandling of classified material, and false statements to federal agents. You can't do this, Derek protested, though the fight had gone out of him. I'm a director, I have stock options. Your stock is currently trading at 0, Derek, I said, watching him get marched toward the door. And I think where you're going, the only currency is cigarettes. As they dragged him out, Ethan tried to slink away toward the fire exit. You too, son, Miller called out without looking. 2 uniformed officers stepped out from the stairwell, blocking his path. Unlicensed access to a federal system. We're going to need to see your laptop. Ethan slumped against the wall, burying his face in his hands. That left Mr. Henderson. The CEO was wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief, looking at me with a mixture of awe and desperation. Elena, he started, putting on his best boardroom smile. That was incredible, truly, you saved the company. I saved the data, Mr. Henderson, I corrected. The company is a different story. Right, look, obviously Derek is gone, we need you back, name your price. Seriously, double salary, triple, I'll give you Derek's office. I'll give you a corner office, just say the word. I looked around the room. I looked at the glass walls, the motivational posters, the scared faces of the colleagues who had watched me walk out 2 days ago without saying a word. I looked at the desk where I had spent thousands of hours building something magnificent, only to have it treated like a disposable commodity. Mr. Henderson, I said, picking up my bag, you signed that termination letter. You didn't check the statutes. You didn't call the agency. You just saw a chance to save a few bucks and you took it. I was misled, he pleaded. You were negligent, I said, and I don't work for negligent people. But the contract, he stammered. We need a lead cryptographer to maintain the DoD contract. If you leave, we lose the certification. You already lost it, Agent Miller interrupted. She was standing by the door, holding the door open for me. The DCSA is pulling the contract effective immediately. We're seizing the node and moving it to a secure federal facility. She looked at me. Director Hastings wants you to oversee the migration. Direct hire, GS-15 level, full benefits, pension, and no one can fire you to save a nickel. I looked at Henderson one last time. He was realizing that his golden parachute had just turned into an anchor. I accept, I said to Miller. I walked out of the war room. I walked past the empty desk where Derek used to sit. I walked past the break room where the espresso machine was still broken. Outside, the air smelled sweet. The police cars were flashing their lights, a silent disco of justice. I saw Derek in the back of one of them, arguing with the glass partition. I pulled out my phone. I had one loose end to tie up. I opened LinkedIn. There, in my inbox, was a message request from 2 days ago. From Derek Vance, subject, let's connect, Mesa. Hey Alina, hope you're well. No hard feelings about the business decision. Let's keep in touch. I laughed. It was a deep, guttural sound that cleared the last of the tension from my chest. I hit block. Then I opened the Reddit app. My post had blown up. Thousands of upvotes. Comments cheering for the crypto queen. People asking if the decaf pod was safe. I typed out a final update. Update, the system is green, the manager is in cuffs, and I just got a promotion. Moral of the story, you can lie to HR, you can lie to your boss, but you can never, ever lie to the code, because the code always remembers, and so do I. I hit post. Ready, Agent Rasova? Miller asked, opening the back door of the Suburban. It's just Ms. Rasova, I said, sliding in. Miller smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Give it a week. We drove away, leaving the glass building behind. It looked small in the rearview mirror. Insignificant, just a box full of people pretending to be important. I turned my face toward the road ahead, toward DC, and toward the real work. My clearance hadn't expired, it had just been upgraded.